The crystal spires of Zephyr Prime burned against the night sky. Ambassador Kira pressed her webbed hands against the council chamber's viewing screen, watching her homeworld die in real time. Orange flames danced across the surface of her planets, great ocean cities, while massive warships blocked out the stars above. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying the musical tones of her aquatic people. "My children are down there." The Galactic Council chamber stretched before her like a vast amphitheater. Representatives from dozens of advanced civilizations sat in their floating pods, their alien faces illuminated by the glow of holographic displays. Each species had evolved differently over millions of years, but they all shared one thing in common today. They were all finding reasons to say no. The Altarian delegate, a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes, spoke first. His voice echoed through the chamber's translation systems. "Our military resources are committed to protecting our trade routes in the Outer Rim. We cannot spare ships for a conflict of this magnitude." Kira's heart sank. The Altarians commanded one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. If they wouldn't help, who would? The representative from the Centauri Collective floated forward in their energy bubble. Protocol 77 Alpha clearly states that member species cannot be compelled to engage in military action beyond their territorial boundaries. Our hands are tied by our own laws. More excuses followed. The Vegan Trade Union's ambassador, a creature that looked like a walking tree with golden bark, pulled up financial projections on his screen. The economic cost of military intervention would destabilize markets across 12 sectors. The numbers simply don't work. One by one, the great civilizations of the galaxy offered their sympathy. They expressed concern. They promised humanitarian aid after the conflict ended. But none offered ships, none offered soldiers, none offered hope. Kira watched her people's desperate evacuation ships fleeing through space, pursued by the dark hulls of hegemony destroyers. Families separated, children crying for parents they would never see again. An entire culture that had given the galaxy beautiful art and profound philosophy was being erased, and the council was discussing logistics. The hegemony had swept across this sector of space like a plague. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They simply consumed everything in their path, adding worlds to their empire and enslaving the survivors. 12 peaceful civilizations had already fallen to their advance, and now the Zephyrians were next. In the back of the chamber, a small group of beings watched quietly through flickering holographic projectors. Humans, the newest members of the Galactic Council. Their technology was primitive compared to the others. Their ships were slow, their weapons were basic. Most council members barely acknowledged their presence. Captain Minho sat in the command center of Lunar Station, Earth's orbital military base. The station wasn't much to look at. Metal corridors, basic life support systems, and walls lined with equipment that other species considered ancient. Through the viewport, he could see Earth's blue marble hanging in space, peaceful and protected. The transmission from the council reached him with a slight delay. He watched Ambassador Kira's plea with growing anger. His crew gathered around him, their faces reflecting the same emotion. These were people who had grown up hearing stories of their own world's struggles, of times when humans had faced extinction and somehow survived. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "orders from Earth Command?" Minho was still watching the screen when President Yuna's face appeared on a secure channel. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept in days. Behind her, he could see the emergency session of Earth's Global Defense Council still in progress. "Minho," she said, "I know what you're thinking. I know what we're all thinking. Our military advisors are telling me this is suicide. We have 43 ships total. The hegemony has thousands. Our weapons are a century behind theirs. We'd be sending our people to die." The captain nodded. Everything she said was true. Earth's fleet consisted mostly of converted cargo vessels and research ships. They had no advanced energy shields, no quantum weapons, no faster-than-light communication systems that worked reliably. They were like children with slingshots facing an army of giants, but President Yuna wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "we're not going to stand by and watch genocide happen when we could do something about it. I'm authorizing Operation Sanctuary. Every ship we have, every person willing to volunteer, The command center erupted in activity. Communications officers began sending encrypted messages to every human vessel in the solar system. Engineers started calculating jump routes to the Zephyrian system. Medical teams prepared for casualties they knew were coming. Captain Minho looked around at his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. This was what made humans different, he realized. Other species calculated odds and made logical decisions. Humans looked at an impossible situation and decided to try anyway. "All stations," he announced over the comm system, "prepare for departure. We're going to war." Dr. Jiho stood in the cargo bay of the merchant vessel, New Seoul surrounded by welding sparks and the sound of grinding metal. The ship had been carrying medical supplies to Mars just 3 days ago. Now her team was bolting missile launchers to its hull. "This is insane," muttered Engineer Park, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We're turning a cargo hauler into a warship with spare parts and prayer." Jiho looked up from the weapon system she was calibrating. Insane is watching genocide happen and doing nothing about it. She gestured to the makeshift armor plating they'd welded around the ship's critical systems. "Will this stop a hegemony plasma cannon? Probably not, but it might buy us enough time to save some lives." Around them, dozens of other ships were undergoing similar modifications. The Iron Mountain, a mining vessel, now bristled with kinetic projectile launchers. The research ship Busan Explorer had been fitted with electronic warfare equipment cobbled together from university laboratories. Every human vessel that could fly was being transformed into something that could fight. The work continued around the clock. Families said goodbye to sons and daughters who might never return. Retired veterans came out of retirement to help with the retrofits. College students volunteered to serve as gunners on ships they'd only read about in textbooks. Admiral. Sola walked through the organized chaos, checking on progress and talking to the crews. She was a small woman with grey hair and kind eyes, but her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent 30 years keeping Earth's shipping lanes safe from pirates and asteroid collisions. "Admiral," called out Captain Kim from the bridge of his converted freighter, "we're getting strange transmissions from the Zephyrian survivors. They want to help with our weapon systems." Sola climbed aboard Kim's ship and listened to the translated messages. The surviving Zephyrians were sharing technical specifications for energy shield generators, technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. But there was something else in their transmissions: gratitude, hope, emotions that no other species had shown them. "They're teaching us their technology," Sola said quietly. "Species that have been spacefaring for thousands of years won't lift a finger to help them. But they're sharing their most advanced secrets with us." The alliance that formed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Zephyrian engineers, working from their cramped refugee ships, guided human technicians through the installation of energy shields that shimmered like soap bubbles around Earth's vessels. The combination was crude but effective: human determination and creativity paired with Zephyrian precision and knowledge. News of humanity's mobilization spread across the galaxy faster than their ships could travel. On 100 different worlds, alien species watched their news broadcasts in confusion. Political analysts tried to explain the human decision using economic models and strategic theories, but none of it made sense. The Altarian news networks ran continuous coverage. "Human military capacity insufficient for engagement," read one headline. Another asked, "Economic motivation behind human intervention?" Their experts debated for hours, unable to understand why any species would risk everything for strangers. The Centauri Collective's government held emergency sessions. Their leaders, beings of pure logic who made decisions through mathematical calculations, ran probability models that all reached the same conclusion: the humans would be destroyed within hours of engaging the hegemony fleet. "Perhaps they don't understand the odds," suggested one Centauri official. "Their primitive computers may have miscalculated the enemy's strength," but other voices were beginning to emerge. On the Vegan Trade Union's capital world, protests began forming. Citizens held signs reading "Shame on us" and "Help the Zephyrians." Young beings from a dozen different species started calling their governments, demanding action. Commander Hana stood on the bridge of her ship, the Daegu Rising, watching the star field ahead. Behind her, 42 other human vessels traveled, in loose formation toward the Zephyrian system. Each ship carried the hopes of their entire species and the desperate trust of the aquatic people they were trying to save. Her communications officer looked up from his station. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian refugee fleet. Ambassador Kira wants to speak with you." The holographic display shimmered to life, showing the Zephyrian leader's graceful form. Even through the translation system, her gratitude was clear. "Commander Hana, our people cannot express what your sacrifice means to us. No species in our recorded history has ever—" Hana held up her hand gently. "Ambassador, you don't need to thank us. This is what people do for each other." She paused, looking out at the stars. "We've made our choice. No one should face extinction alone." The transmission reached news networks across the galaxy. Beings who had lived for centuries, who had seen empires rise and fall, who prided themselves on their logical approach to survival, heard those simple words and felt something they hadn't experienced in millennia. For the first time in galactic history, a species was going to war not for conquest, not for resources, not for strategic advantage, but simply because it was the right thing to do. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes of the desperate and the shame of the mighty. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace to witness horror. Massive hegemony dreadnoughts, each the size of a small city, were systematically destroying refugee camps on the outer moons of the Zephyrian system. Escape pods drifted helplessly in space, while enemy fighters hunted down the survivors like prey. Commander Hana gripped her command chair as the tactical display lit up with red warning signals. "Sweet mother of—" she breathed, staring at the enemy formation. 47 hegemony warships spread across the system like a dark constellation. Each one outgunned her entire fleet. "Ma'am," her weapons officer called out, his voice tight with fear. "We're detecting at least 12 dreadnoughts. Our entire missile inventory wouldn't scratch the paint on one of those things." The hegemony had ruled through overwhelming force for 3 centuries. Their ships were designed to intimidate as much as destroy. Black hulls covered in weapon ports, engines that burned like the fires of hell, and shields that could deflect the combined firepower of most planetary defense systems. But the humans had something the hegemony had never encountered before: the willingness to try impossible things. Lieutenant Tay commanded a squadron of converted mining ships from the outer colonies. These vessels had been built to crack asteroids and haul ore, not fight wars. Their hulls were reinforced to survive impacts from space debris, and their mining charges were designed to split rock. Now Tay was about to find out if they could damage something much more dangerous. "Listen up, miners," she broadcast to her squadron. "We're not warships and we're not soldiers, but we know how to work in dangerous places, and we know how to break things that seem unbreakable." She watched her tactical display as a hegemony supply convoy moved between 2 moons. "Target that convoy. Hit them fast, hit them hard, then get out before they know what happened." The mining ships accelerated toward the enemy formation, their modified engines pushing them to speeds their designers never intended. The hegemony escorts detected them too late. These weren't the clean energy signatures of military vessels, but the chaotic emissions of industrial equipment running at maximum power. Tai's ship, the Gang 1 breaker, opened fire with mining charges that had been modified into improvised missiles. The explosions tore through the convoy's shields like they were made of paper. Supply ships that had been carrying ammunition and fuel for the dreadnoughts erupted in brilliant fireballs. "All ships, scatter pattern," Tay ordered, as hegemony fighters swarmed toward them. Her squadron broke apart like a school of fish, each ship heading in a different direction. The enemy pilots, trained to fight organized military formations, struggled to track targets that moved like chaotic asteroids. Meanwhile, Colonel Nari was fighting a different kind of battle from the communication center of her command vessel. A former intelligence officer, she had spent years studying how to break enemy morale. Now she was putting that knowledge to use against an empire that had never faced psychological warfare. "We've cracked their communication codes," reported Sergeant O, looking up from his workstation. "Their command frequency is completely open to us." Nari smiled grimly. Then let's give them something to think about. She activated the broadcasting equipment and began transmitting on all hegemony military channels. But instead of threats or demands for surrender, she broadcast something much more dangerous: the truth. Her voice, translated into the hegemony's guttural language, reached every ship in their fleet. Hegemony soldiers, you were told you were fighting dangerous criminals. You were told the Zephyrians were a threat to galactic peace, but look around you. You're bombing refugee camps. You're killing children. Your leaders sent you here to commit genocide. The broadcast continued around the clock. Nari played recordings of Zephyrian music and poetry, showing the beauty of the culture the hegemony was trying to destroy. She shared intercepted communications from hegemony high command, revealing how they spoke about their own soldiers as expendable resources. Your empire tells you that you're the master race, she continued in another broadcast. But masters don't send their people to die for the profit of a few. You're not conquerors. You're slaves with better uniforms. The psychological impact was immediate. Hegemony formation discipline began to break down as ship commanders started questioning their orders. Some vessels hung back from attacks, while others requested clarification from their superiors for missions they had never questioned before. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Jiho made a discovery that changed everything. Working alongside Zephyrian engineers aboard a refugee ship, she realized that human technology and Zephyrian knowledge could create something neither species could achieve alone. "Look at this," she told Commander Hana over a secure channel. "The Zephyrians have perfect energy shield technology, but it's rigid, designed for their orderly thinking patterns. Our weapon systems are crude but adaptable, designed by people who improvise solutions. Together, they created hybrid defense systems that confused the hegemony's targeting computers. Human ships suddenly began sporting energy shields that flickered and shifted unpredictably, powered by fusion reactors that operated outside normal parameters. Weapon systems that combined Zephyrian precision with human creativity produced effects that the enemy's computers couldn't analyze or counter. The first major engagement took place near Zephyr Prime itself. 23 human vessels faced a hegemony battle group of superior firepower. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with 12 human ships destroyed or disabled. But for the first time in 3 centuries, a hegemony advance had been stopped. Admiral Rask, commander of the hegemony fleet, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "How?" he demanded of his officers. "How did primitive vessels destroy 3 of our cruisers?" His tactical officer, a being whose species had served the hegemony for generations, looked confused. "Sir, their weapons shouldn't be able to penetrate our shields. Their tactics make no logical sense. They fight like they don't care if they die, and that was exactly the point. The humans had brought something to the battlefield that the hegemony had never encountered: the willingness to sacrifice themselves for others. It was a force more powerful than any weapon, and it was beginning to change the course of the war. The news traveled faster than any ship could fly. Across the galaxy, in cantinas and trading posts, on colony worlds and space stations, beings whispered about the impossible battle at Zephyr Prime. Humans, the newest, weakest species in the Galactic Council, had stopped the hegemony's advance. The crystal world of Thara, where the builder species carved their cities from living rock, emergency council sessions ran through the night. The builders had always been dismissed as primitive by the major galactic powers because they preferred simple tools and ancient crafts over advanced technology. Now they watched the human broadcasts with something that felt like hope. "These humans fight like us," said Elder Keth, his crystalline form glowing with excitement. "They use what they have, not what others think they should have." Similar conversations were happening across dozens of worlds. The Wanderers, nomadic traders who lived in converted asteroid ships, began sending encrypted messages to their scattered fleets. The Stone Singers, who communicated through vibrations in planetary bedrock, felt the tremors of change resonating through their network. Captain Minho received the first mysterious supply drop 3 days after the battle. His ship's sensors detected an unmarked cargo container drifting near their patrol route. Inside, they found rare minerals used in advanced weapon manufacturing. And a simple message. From friends who understand. More packages arrived over the following weeks. The builders sent crystalline focusing arrays that made human laser weapons twice as effective. The Wanderers provided navigation charts showing secret routes through hegemony space. The Stone Singers transmitted geological data revealing weak points in hegemony fortress worlds. It's like the galaxy's outcasts are finally standing up, observed Engineer Park as he installed builder crystal arrays on their weapon systems. Everyone the major powers ignored is suddenly choosing sides. The hegemony tried to stop the aid by increasing patrols and threatening neutral species, but the packages kept coming. Small acts of rebellion that added up to something much bigger. The real turning point came during the battle for Kira's moon, a small world where the Zephyrians had built their most sacred temple. The hegemony wanted to destroy it as a symbol of their total victory, but Admiral Solar had different plans. "We're not just fighting for territory," she told her officers during the mission briefing. "We're fighting for the right to exist differently." That temple represents everything the hegemony wants to erase: art, philosophy, the belief that beauty matters more than power. The battle began at dawn, local time. Hegemony ships moved in perfect formation toward the moon's surface, while human vessels darted between them like angry wasps. But this time, the humans had a secret weapon: desperation combined with training. Sergeant June led the first boarding party onto a hegemony command cruiser. His team had spent weeks studying captured enemy equipment, learning how to move through their ships and operate their systems. They wore modified mining suits that could survive in space and carried weapons, designed for close-quarters fighting. "Remember," June told his team as they cut through the enemy hull, "these ships are built for intimidation, not repelling borders. They've never faced anyone crazy enough to try this." The interior of the hegemony vessel was designed to impress: high ceilings, polished metal surfaces, and holographic displays that showed the Empire's conquests. But it was also poorly defended against internal threats. The crew had never imagined that primitive species would dare to board their ships. June's team fought their way to the command center, while Zephyrian technician Vara, working from a concealed position, used her people's advanced computer skills to hack into the ship's systems. The combination was devastating. Human soldiers clearing rooms while Zephyrian programmers turned the ship's own defenses against its crew. "I'm in their navigation system," Vara reported, her musical voice tense with concentration. "I can see their entire fleet deployment across the sector. The information they captured changed everything. For the first time, the humans knew where the hegemony kept their supply bases, where their commanders lived, and what their next targets would be. But more importantly, they discovered something that shook the enemy to their core. The hegemony. Commanders were terrified. Intercepted communications revealed panic at the highest levels of their military. Admirals who had conquered dozens of worlds were requesting reinforcements to fight a species they had dismissed as harmless. Generals who had never retreated from battle were asking for permission to withdraw from human-occupied systems. Admiral Rask's personal logs, captured during the boarding action, revealed the depth of their fear. The humans fight like a virus that has infected their entire species. They don't follow proper military doctrine. They don't retreat when they should. They don't surrender when defeated. How do you fight an enemy that would rather die than abandon their allies? Admiral Solar read the intercepted messages with growing understanding. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," she told her staff during a strategy meeting. "We assumed our weakness was our primitive technology. But that's not what's winning this war." She brought up tactical displays showing human victories across the sector. "Look at these battles. We won because we did things they didn't expect. We boarded their ships when no one had tried that in centuries. We used mining equipment as weapons. We turned their own psychology against them." Captain Minho nodded slowly. "They're used to fighting other empires, organized military forces that follow the same rules they do. But we're not an empire. We're just people who decided to help." The psychological impact was spreading through hegemony space like wildfire. On conquered worlds, enslaved populations began whispering about the humans who fought impossible odds. Resistance movements that had been crushed for decades started reorganizing. Even some hegemony soldiers began deserting, unwilling to fight, an enemy that reminded them of everything they had lost. The hegemony leadership recognized the threat. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was an ideological infection that could spread throughout their empire. Emergency orders went out to commit every available ship to destroying the human fleet before their example inspired more rebellions. But it was already too late. The humans had proven that the hegemony could be beaten, and across the galaxy, the oppressed were beginning to remember what hope felt like. The real war was just beginning. The final battle began at 600 hours, Galactic Standard Time, when the largest hegemony fleet in recorded history dropped out of hyperspace around Zephyr Prime. 300 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their dark hulls blotting out the stars. This wasn't just about conquering another world anymore. This was about destroying the idea that the hegemony could be resisted. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Soul's Pride, watching the enemy armada through damaged viewports. His ship bore the scars of dozens of battles, hull patches welded over blast craters, jury-rigged weapon systems held together with determination and spare parts. Half his original crew was gone, replaced by volunteers from across human space. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Yoon, her voice steady despite the odds, "we're receiving final messages from Earth. President Yuna sends her regards and says the whole planet is watching." Minho nodded, not trusting his voice. Behind the hegemony fleet, he could see the evacuation ships carrying the last Zephyrian civilians to safety. Everything they had fought for came down to the next few hours. The human fleet had been reduced to 18 operational vessels, against 300. The mathematics were simple and brutal. "All ships," Minho broadcast on the fleet frequency, "today we make our stand. Not because we can win, but because some things are worth losing for." The battle erupted across three-dimensional space as human ships scattered into defensive positions around the planet. The Busan Runner, commanded by Captain Park, led a desperate charge against the enemy's left flank while the converted mining vessel Iron Mountain used its industrial cutting lasers to slice through hegemony fighter formations. But the enemy kept coming. For every hegemony ship the humans destroyed, 2 more took its place. Captain Minho watched his tactical display as friendly icons began disappearing one by one. Then something unexpected happened. New signals appeared on the edge of the system, ships dropping out of hyperspace with energy signatures that made Minho's crew stare in disbelief. "Sir," Tactical Officer Kim called out, his voice filled with wonder, "those are Altarian dreadnoughts and Centauri battlecruisers. And, sir, I'm counting ships from 12 different species." Across the galaxy, the same conversation was happening in government buildings and military command centers. On Altair Prime, the High Council had been in emergency session for 18 hours. The chamber where they had once dismissed the Zephyrian plea now echoed with heated debate. "We cannot ignore this any longer," declared Council Leader Jen, her silver skin reflecting the urgent glow of the holographic displays around her. "The humans have shamed us all. While we calculated profit margins, they were dying for strangers." Similar scenes played out on Centauri stations and vegan trade worlds. The species that had once prided themselves on logical decision-making were discovering that some decisions couldn't be made with computers and spreadsheets. The arrival of the Allied fleet changed everything. Altarian energy weapons, designed for precision strikes across vast distances, began targeting hegemony command ships. Centauri quantum computers, capable of processing millions of calculations per second, coordinated the Allied attack with mathematical perfection. The Vegan Union's massive industrial ships deployed construction drones that could repair battle damage in real time, but it was the combination that made the difference. Human creativity and determination, paired with Zephyrian innovation, enhanced by the advanced technology of the galaxy's great powers, created a fighting force unlike anything ever seen. Admiral Rask, commanding the hegemony fleet from his flagship, watched his tactical display with growing horror. His perfect formation was dissolving into chaos as Allied ships used tactics that his computers couldn't predict or counter. How are they coordinating? He demanded of his officers. 12 different species, using completely different technologies, and they're fighting like a single organism. The answer was simple, though Rask would never understand it. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, the hegemony fleet was retreating in disorder, leaving behind the wreckage of their ambitions and the first major defeat in their 3-century history. In the aftermath, Captain Minho found himself aboard a Zephyrian hospital ship, being treated for injuries he barely remembered receiving. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see something that made all the pain worthwhile. Zephyrian children swimming in the rebuilt crystal gardens of their homeworld, their laughter carrying through the water like music. Ambassador. Kira approached his bedside, moving with the graceful flow that characterized her people. Captain Minho, our children ask if they may name their nursery schools after your ship. They want to remember the humans who came when no one else would. The formal ceremonies came later. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered to sign the Sanctuary Accords, a mutual defense pact that declared no species would face extinction alone, while the signatories had the power to intervene. But for Minho and his surviving crew, the real ceremony happened much more quietly. They stood in a Zephyrian memory garden, where crystalline trees recorded the stories of every being who had died defending their world. Human names were now carved alongside Zephyrian ones, their sacrifice remembered forever in living crystal. Dr. Jiho, her arm still in a sling from the final battle, read from the inscription, "Here rest the Guardians, those who chose compassion over calculation, who proved that the measure of civilization is not technological advancement, but the willingness to stand for others when no one else will." The title stuck. Throughout the galaxy, humans became known as the Guardians, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had shown what it meant to be truly civilized. Years later, when new species joined the galactic community, they would hear the story of the humans who sacrificed everything for strangers. The tale became legend, passed down through generations as a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from what you can do for yourself, but from what you're willing to do for others. The hegemony still existed in the dark corners of the galaxy, but they never again moved openly against peaceful worlds. They had learned that there were those who would stand against them, regardless of the cost, and in the crystal gardens of Zephyr Prime, children still sang songs about the guardians who came from Earth,